All right. So thanks for those that have joined so far. Okay, yeah. So for the link, so I'll go ahead and I'll link these notes again here, and I'll actually link you the specific note that we're going to be looking at today. So this is my GitHub page, and then we're inside of this particular project, which is where I'm going to host basically everything for this class that we kind of need. And so to get to that node, I just click table of contents, and then I go to session 5. So just to reintroduce myself, my name is Paige Swanson. I'm a full stack web developer for our financial services software company. And with the library, I've kind of been hosting like a series of sessions over the past like almost a year now, just trying to teach people in New Haven and around New Haven how to code. Really, anyone who wants to join, how to code and what coding is, and kind of teaching things about software development. And so this series in particular that we've been doing, this is the 5th installment. We've been learning about app building. So we've been learning about the different technologies available for building apps. We've been learning about the kind of different like tools that you can use to build apps. And so today we're going to kind of continue with that, and we're going to work on some styles. We're going to try to use an application template that's made available for building apps using Nativescript view. We're going to take one of the templates that they provide, and we're going to try to bring our own styles, which would be like CSS. We're going to try to bring our own CSS into the app. And we're going to try to look and see kind of what differences it makes and how we can modify some of them or tweak them, and see the changes into like our preview, the preview of our mobile app. So again, if you're new to the series, it may seem like some things don't have a lot of context. That's okay. I encourage you to like go back and look at some of the other session notes if you want to maybe catch up. But otherwise, I hope you can still take something out of this, even if you maybe don't know everything that's going on. And I don't know if Celeste, you wanted to say anything before we start.
Yes, I mean, if you like to mention about your office hours, and I also wanted to mention that we have one more session for build an app, and then we will continue in April with a new content. We haven't decided exactly what it is, but we're gonna be discussing that later on. So you're gonna probably find out.
Yeah. Yes. Okay, so for the office hours, yeah. So my office hours are every Monday. So if you feel like during this session, you maybe had like an extra question, or you had something outstanding, or you just wanted to ask like something that takes a little bit of time to like discuss, or you just have some code that you want me to look at, or like anything like that, you can sign up for my office hours. If we go back to this page, so library app starter, for this series, you can see that I have an email listed and I have the office hours sign up. If you go here, you'll see blocks for each Monday. So if you click in, and just to show again, yeah, you'll see each Monday there's like blocks that you can click on, and you can sign up for these. And it'll actually send you a Zoom link now, so that you can just join that as soon as it gets to that time. So yeah, that's how you can sign up and ask me any questions you have or anything like that. And then you can also email me whenever you want. If you have any questions at all that are like open-ended, maybe you can just email me there. Okay, so back to the notes for today. First thing I like to address each time is just like identifying like a helpful resource, or like some kind of like a piece of information related to like some of the technologies that we've been using. And I just wanted to give a quick reference to this website. I find myself using this website all the time. It's a really, really fantastic developer resource. And it basically is a really good breakdown of all kinds of technologies available to you if you're developing like web applications or web related applications, and really all kinds of things. They have like a repository of kind of like references and different guides, tutorials if you're into that. But you can see there's all kinds of just general documents for all kinds of different technologies and like discoveries that you can make on this website. There's tons of things to do. But I really like their Learn Web Development series. It is really useful. It's informed me when I've like kind of taught things. So yeah, I'd definitely like to share that with any like newcomers to web development. Jumping kind of into the more specific stuff, more specific technologies for our app. I'm just going to check the chat really quick. Oh, thanks. Just a reminder for getting started with, oh, 1 second. Just a reminder for getting started with Nativescript and developing applications for Nativescript View. To get set up with the Nativescript CLI or CLI, which we mentioned a couple of sessions ago, you can build a new template very quickly, which just means like a really basic app that has a lot of code already in place for you to get started with. You can do that just by running this command. So it's T optional. The T is optional here. You can just say ns create. So I'm going to do that on my computer actually. Oh, whoops. I did not mean to stop sharing. Let me share again. Move this out of the way. Okay. So this is my terminal application, which on Windows might look a little bit different. I have a note from session 3 talking about how to get set up with a similar terminal on Windows. If you have any questions about that, you can come talk to me in office hours. I can show you how to get this set up, but I have Nativescript installed on my computer. So that's where I'm going to be working on the app. And I just want to show this command because it's really useful if you don't know, starting from a blank slate when building an app or any kind of thing is really difficult. So the Nativescript like tutorials, the Nativescript like software provides this templating system, which just basically gets you started with a really simple app. So the way to do that quickly is to say tns create. And actually, I'm going to make sure I'm in a place where I actually want to make this app. And I am. So I just say tns create in my command prompt. Okay, and that's going to run. And what it's going to do is like it's going to be really friendly, and it's going to say, oh, like let's get started trying to make an app. We can give it a really quick name. I'm just going to call it a simple view app because we're using Nativescript View in this series. And I'm going to kind of toggle through the options using the arrow keys here, and I'm going to select highlight view. And then it's going to give me some options for what I want that template to look like. Either just like a blank template with like nothing in it, a blank app, a side drawer, which is going to have like basically just like a little menu that pops out on the left side of the app and then closes away when you don't need it, and then a tabbed application. I'm okay with either one, but I think I'll go with the tabs because I kind of prefer that kind of interface. Okay. And it's going to work in the background. It's going to try to load the template for us and get things started. But I just really wanted to show you like how I'm getting to the code that I'm about to present in a second here. That's really all you have to do to start looking at some like very quick setup code. Okay, so let's kind of hop away from that. So we followed the steps and we set up the template of our choice. The next part I want to kind of address is kind of like some more software that you'd want to have set up on your computer to kind of work on app development, specifically if you're building an app using Vue, in particular, like we're doing. Last session, I demonstrated a particular code editor called Visual Studio Code. I showed how you could use GitHub and you could use the Git software to basically upload changes to the GitHub website, where you might have your project hosted, kind of like I do here. Oh, and I actually need to log in here to my GitHub account to kind of show you what I'm doing with that project. But while that's going, I can quit that. Okay, so like this is my GitHub webpage. We talked last time about how you can set one of these up and create a project website. I showed last time the editor Visual Studio Code. This time I'm showing the editor Atom. You can find setup instructions in some of the previous sessions for both of those editors. Both of them are great editors. I like using both of them, but I just wanted to show Atom today, mainly to highlight a couple of specific items. And I'm switching back to the notes here. It wants me to reload because I signed in. So what I want to talk about specifically here is like when you use either Atom or Visual Studio Code, one of the big benefits that you get from using it is, in fact, let me just check the chat. Oh, how can you get access to the setup? So just really quick to answer that, if you go to my previous session notes, I would encourage, like if you haven't been present for some of the other sessions, to take a look back through those notes. And I tried to give some clear notes on how to get yourself set up, doing what we're doing right now, which is developing the app on our computer. I even tried to give some notes for Windows in particular. So definitely take a look through those. And if you have any questions, again, feel free to sign up for the office hours and I can help get you set up. Okay, so this Atom editor, though, you can get from just by going to Atom, I believe it's atom.io. Yeah. So atom.io, it'll give you a download link like this. You can download it and you can start setting it up. And then once you do that, to develop apps using Nativescript Vue, you can check out these two packages. They're called packages. And the way you do that is you can go, let's actually just close everything so that we can start from scratch. You can kind of see, you can see what you're working with when you just open the editor from scratch. Okay, so we get a welcome screen and we get a welcome guide, and then we get this empty project drawer on the left here. So what I'm going to do is go over to install a package. So I'm going to click that. I'll open the installer. This is going to prompt me to install a new package, so I can search for like different packages, like maybe like if I wanted something with the C language, like if I wanted support for writing code in the programming language C, there's some packages for that, but I'm not interested in installing a new package. I already have the packages I want installed, so I'm going to show them to you. So I'm going to click packages here and I'm going to close this welcome guide. So the two packages I wanted to talk about were just language view. So you can search that if you download Atom, and view FMT or view format. This is basically going to make it so that when we are looking at the view code in our editor, it'll look really nice and it'll be easier to read. Because otherwise it'll just look like just plain text, meaning like it'll look like you're reading a Word document or something like that. And that's not very helpful when you're writing code, because you want it to be formatted in a way that's easy to read. It's easy to tell what's going on. If you're using VS Code, which I also have setup instructions for in the previous sessions, you can install this plugin. It's called Feature. In Visual Studio Code, excuse me, I think they're called extensions. Yeah, it's an extension. And this will actually show you how to install it right here, going to this website. So Feature is another tool, yeah, for doing the same thing. Just lets you view code, view code, VUE, in a really nice way. It also actually does a bunch of other things for us, like error checking and things like this, which Adam will also do using some of these extensions and some others. But I just wanted to show some simple ones to begin with. So now that we've got that kind of out of the way, let's try to use Adam to add a project, or open a project on our computer. So I'm going to say reopen a project. In my case, I can actually reopen a project because I already had the project open. So I'm just going to do that. So it shows, this is where I saved my project. You'll notice it says library app starter. That's actually the same as, I'm going to move this out of the way. Library app starter is actually the same as my GitHub project here, library app starter. That's because these two things are linked. And we talked about that in the last session, how my GitHub project is actually, oh, did it open somewhere else? It didn't want to open it. Oh, it did. Okay, great. So it opened the project. It just didn't show me that it did that. So I had to click over here to the drawer on the left. I'm going to click this, and it shows a couple of different things. It shows the table of contents, which you're already familiar with, that are hosted on this website. So, you know, if we open this file, you can actually see that it lines up with the content that's on this page. So that's where that's coming from. It's coming from this project. So I'm going to go back here, and I don't need this right now, so I'm going to close it. And what I'm going to focus on are one of these two folders. This is a folder that I was working in before, just doing some sample work, but this is the one that I believe we just set up. It's called the Simple View app. So if we go back to our command line, I know I'm hopping around a lot, just try to bear with me. So we were in our command line setting up a template to get started with. And I put it into this project folder, which is just a normal old folder. It's just that Adam will refer to it as a project folder. In fact, maybe it'll be more helpful if I show you the folder in the file explorer so you can see it more clearly. So this is my file explorer. You can see I have a folder called library app starter. It looks exactly the same as it does in Adam right here. And I now have this simple view app folder. The command I ran earlier, if I scroll up with my arrow keys, you can see the commands I ran previously, is tns create, and then I walked through those prompts. It made this folder for us called simple view app. It's telling me to do a couple of things. First of all, it's telling me to run the command cd simple view app. So I'm going to do that, cd simple view app, and I pressed tab, and it should just know exactly what I'm talking about. And then it wants me to preview it on the device, meaning if I was using Nativescript preview, which is like a little software tool they put together to help you preview your apps. If I wanted to use that, I could run this command right now to preview the app. I'm not going to do that actually because I want to run it using the Apple iOS simulator, which is more akin to actually like running the app on like the phone, like you might do if you wanted to put it on your iPhone or if you wanted to put it on Android. I don't have an Android setup. That's certainly something I could help someone with though in office hours if you wanted to try to do that for yourself. But I'm using iOS. But Android is a very similar setup. You're going to set up something it's called an emulator. So I'm going to go ahead and run, like we haven't written any code at all. All we've done is run this command. I'm going to go ahead and run this command, tns run ios, and I'm going to give it these two dashes and say emulator. And actually, I'm going to try to zoom in for you because I just realized that text is probably really small. Okay, so it says tns run ios emulator. So what this means is it's saying in the directory I'm in right now, simple view app, my command line tells me which directory I'm in. It also tells me right here. And Windows should do something similarly if you get that set up. I'm saying run this app for iOS, but use the emulator that I have set up on my computer. When I run this, you'll see the emulator open in the background on my computer. It'll just take a second, but it's going to try to basically get all of the necessary pieces for this app. It's going to download them from the internet. It's going to download all of the dependencies and things like this. But first, it's actually going to try to open the iOS emulator. So you can see it popped up. And this basically looks like an iPhone, as you can imagine. This happens to be the iPhone that I have. So this is the emulator that I wanted to use. So it's gonna open this phone, this like fake software phone. It's turning it on. And then right now in the background, what it's doing is it's like doing some work to, you can see here, to like get all of the code put together from the template. And it's going to try and basically build all of the code into an app that can then be installed on this software phone. And then from the software phone, we can actually run the app. And it is way closer to running the app on our phone, like than some of the other like preview methods would be. It takes a little bit of setup to get to this point. I had to troubleshoot a handful of things because I have an older Apple computer, so things didn't go quite perfectly. But I should be prepared to kind of help other people kind of get to the point that I did. But hopefully things for you are very smooth if you have like a more up-to-date computer, or if you have maybe Windows. You know, in any event, hopefully you can get to this point using the notes from the previous sessions. But so right now what it's doing is like it put all of the JavaScript and sort of Nativescript code together that we're going to take a look at in a second here. And it's going to go ahead and try to put the app into a state where it can get onto the phone. I'm going to kind of let all of that stuff happen in the background because I'm not super concerned until it actually installs, so that I can kind of show you what that looks like. In the meantime, though, what I'm interested in is actually opening up this folder. I'm going to open this one to kind of show you what is going on in here as it relates to some of the notes that I have prepared for today's session. So we already talked about editor extensions and stuff like that. So the next thing that I really wanted to talk about is like, you know, if you get started off with the template, you get some very basic code. One of the things I think most people will notice immediately is like how the template looks, like the colors, the way the buttons look, or the way the text looks, or the font size, and things like this. All of those things are controlled with a web technology called CSS. And I didn't put a link in for this. Well, I kind of did. I put one down here. But for sort of like code newcomers and really web newcomers, CSS is a web technology that could be used to build apps, to build mobile apps with specifically with Nativescript, and a couple of other frameworks that I've mentioned before. CSS is a web technology that basically lets you define a set of rules that can be used to describe the way different aspects of a page or aspects of a document need to look. So CSS is really a tool for styling, as it's often called, or for like appearance and things like this. So a really good document on this, again, I'll recommend the MDN. If we go here, and you'll see I have it bookmarked in general. If you go here and you click technologies, this CSS page is, first of all, a really good explanation of like what CSS is. But there's also some tutorials here and like how to use it and things like this. So I'd highly recommend these. I'll make sure to include a link to this in my notes. And in fact, I can do that right now since I have the notes here available in my editor. So these are the notes for the session. And I can just go ahead and make a link to that since it's all in the same project. So CSS is this. Okay. So given that, now we are aware of CSS as this kind of like way of making applications look a certain way. The next question kind of is like, what is a framework? I might have already mentioned even the word framework to begin with, but what is a CSS framework? And a framework in general, I guess, might be helpful to define to begin with. But a framework is a collection of accessible references for bringing in like meaning and for referencing complex code quickly. So that is kind of a mouthful, but essentially what it is like a quick way for accessing a lot of code, generally speaking, in code that we might write ourselves. So like if I have a piece of code that I want to like, for instance, send an email to someone with, instead of writing the code like top to bottom, like, okay, I'm going to build an email server that's capable of like sending emails. I'm going to like write all of the code that builds the email. I'm going to like write all of the code to talk to the network and to like actually send the data over so that the email is received. I might use an email framework in my code that makes this very easy. And the only code I have to write is like maybe what content I want in the email itself. So like I might write code that like adds a table to the email or like adds some links, and then I could use a framework, an email framework, to actually like send the email off and do all of the complicated stuff. So what I want to introduce is something called a CSS framework, which is basically going to let us access maybe a lot of like or it's going to let us use some simple tools to kind of access somewhat complex styles or somewhat complex appearance changes. It may not be super clear right now, but that's okay, because I'm just going to show you exactly what I'm talking about in the code. But the point of doing this is that we can quickly achieve something functional for our UI. That's our user interface. So the user interface of our app is like what the app actually looks like. And in the background, it looks like our app actually installed successfully. So that's really good. It's going to spit out a ton of things at you when this command runs, but just remember the simple command is right here at the top of the terminal there. It says Tns Run Ios Emulator. So that's how we got to this point after we installed our little template, and it gives us this really nice app. So off the bat, we get this really nice app that works great. It doesn't really do anything, except it holds a lot of like information, it seems. It organizes data for us. We can click around like we're on our phone. You can see we even have like volume buttons and stuff like this, just like you would have on the phone. We have like a silent mode switch and things like this. So all of the things that are on the phone that would normally be on the phone are all here. And we'll eventually, when the app, maybe if we make some progress on our app, we can even interact with some of these gestures, like within our app code. And we're kind of already doing that. I mean, in a simple way, right? Like obviously you can tell that our app knows if we click on something, or in the mobile world, if we're touching something. And we can go down to the bottom here, and this is the main feature of our app, is that we have these tabs. And these tabs do one thing and one thing only, and it just changes the view that we can observe in our app. Okay, so this is like what our app does. It's what we have for now. But what we want to do, and I'm just going to minimize this, by the way. What we want to do is go about making some changes to it. In particular, what I'm talking about here, the UI. So the UI for our app could be described as like everything you see here, from like this little bar at the top that says we're home, to this like list of items that we then click, and then they have a description. Like this is like the UI. It's like the interface for our app, for accessing information in our app and for doing different tasks. So we want to quickly achieve something functional for our UI. Now, obviously, the template gives us a lot of that. Like this template is pretty good. I mean, it looks nice to me. I kind of like it. I like the way it looks. I like the way some of the things look. But obviously, you know, if I'm an app designer, I want to give it my own personal sort of feel. Just reading this last note here before we kind of continue. If we use a CSS framework, imagine this is me trying to convince you, that a CSS framework is kind of useful. It lets us get a much stronger idea of the shape of an app range from deep and configurable to simple and immediate. That's actually a really long-winded sentence. I don't really know why I put that here. You can consider that kind of a typo. I will fix that. I don't really know what I was trying to say, but I think basically what I'm saying is like a CSS framework lets you do some pretty complex things easily. And you'll see that when we load our little CSS framework, it'll change a lot of things very quickly, which is really nice. But it'll also make any additional changes relatively simple to do. So I'll kind of get into that in a second. I wanted to show off one in particular that I really like. If you joined this course and you were thinking of maybe making a web app or a mobile app, with maybe a different framework, and you're just interested in the way that it's done or how to get set up, I wanted to show off this one example of a framework, CSS framework. It's called Tacit. I really like it a lot because like I am kind of a dummy when it comes to like design and sort of like style and making things look really nice. I'm not as good as at that, but what this does is it sets out to make a web page or potentially like a web app look really nice without you having to do like virtually anything. What that means is it basically sets up a bunch of CSS rules that require only basic HTML code. If you're a little bit familiar with HTML, you might recognize some of these tags that are being referenced, but it basically provides you with a bunch of CSS that will just like work. You don't have to do anything with it. You just load, as it mentions here, you load the CSS by adding this little item into your HTML code. And you reload the page, and all of a sudden your web page will look just really snazzy. It'll have these nice buttons. If you have any buttons, if you have any inputs, they'll look like this. If you have any tables, all of a sudden they'll look like this. So I highly recommend things like this because it just makes your life easier, and it lets you think about the content of your page to begin with, and then you can kind of come back and make things a little more custom. So I like something like this, but unfortunately, we can't use something like Tacit. And why is that? Well, Nativescript, the technology, is built upon a couple of things. It's built upon JavaScript, and Nativescript Vue in particular. This is Nativescript Vue that I'm talking about here. So nativescriptvue.org. So Nativescript Vue. I've talked about it in the past sessions, like what, more in detail, like what the difference between Vue and Nativescript is, and like why we want to use one or the other. But just to give you a refresher, this is the docs page, the documentation page for that technology. Anyway, back to our notes. So Nativescript in particular is built upon JavaScript, which is like a coding language. It's built upon Nativescript Vue in particular is built upon Vue, which is like a framework that's going to help us write JavaScript for apps a little bit faster. And it's built upon CSS to help us style and change the appearance of our applications, kind of build good UIs. What it's not built upon is HTML. HTML is a web technology specifically for adding content to a web page. Nativescript is going to use something different. It's using what's called like an XML style document layout. And to finally look at some code, if you've set up this simple Vue app with the template, like I did myself, you'll see a bunch of files in here, which I described some of in session 4, if you wanted to take a look at that. If you just hop right into the app folder, which is where most of what's called the source code is, and you hop into the components folder, this is where basically all of our Vue code and all of our like app code live. So you can basically get most of your work done just in this folder, save for the app SCSS files and the app Android SCSS files. These are like platform specific CSS essentially. Yeah, and I guess it wants us to put, okay, that makes sense. So it wants us to put any CSS rules. By the way, this is like what CSS looks like. In particular, this is actually SCSS. It's like a flavor of CSS that is like a little more, it's a little bit more accessible to write, but that's okay. You don't have to really worry about that because we can just write normal old CSS in here too. So and that's probably what I'm going to be doing anyhow. So you can see in here basically all of the CSS code that is making our app look like this right now. So the font, for example, looks like this because of these rules. The font size looks like this. The font weight looks like this because of these rules. And then we have like navigation items, in particular, like these, which are changing based on these rules here. We don't have to get too deep into the details, and we don't even have to necessarily change these rules here, but we can give it a shot because I think it'll be interesting to do so. But I just want to show you what like a CSS file looks like. But all of these CSS rules or the CSS code, this is going to apply to the whole app. So like when I say whole app, I mean, it's going to apply to anything in the search tab. It's going to apply to anything in the browse tab. It's going to apply to anything in the home tab. It's going to apply to these items and their descriptions. It's going to apply to this header up top here. So any rules that we put in here will apply anywhere else in the app. So the next question then would be where is all of the content that we're seeing, like for this home page and this browse tab and this search tab, like where is all this content coming from in the code? And the answer is in all of these files. So these are Vue files. The Vue files are where you're going to do most of your work for your app if you use Nativescript Vue. Each Vue file describes basically a chunk of our app. And we can kind of break each of them down, and you should be familiar with kind of what each of these Vue files probably describes. Probably just by even looking at the name, right? Because things are kind of logically laid out, thankfully. They don't have to be, but in the template they are, which is nice. So if we go over to the search tab, that is like what this code is giving us. So the code here, search.vue, is giving us everything you see in this search tab. So not these things down here, and not necessarily, excuse me, actually, yes, it does describe this part. So like it says text search here under action bar. So this is an action bar. And actually we can change this. So I can prove to you that that's the case. just say a search bar. And what's going to happen in the background here is it's going to acknowledge that I made a change, and it's going to update the app, which is pretty cool. So this is kind of how you do development in Nativescript, kind of like on your local machine. That's why it's really nice to do this, because you get a lot of these nice tools. So we can make changes and they'll get updated right here. So you can see that I just proved that this view file .vue is what's actually updating the content here. And I could add some content in the middle here, like it says, here's the code that's basically giving us this little magnifying glass icon. In this case, I mean, it's just an icon that we're actually, okay, I see. So this might be a little bit confusing to explain if you've never seen anything like this, but this is basically an encoding that represents this icon. And what we're doing is we're using an attribute or like a property to say that the icon should look the way this looks right here. That might be a little bit too in the weeds. So let's try to go to an element of this app that we can like kind of understand a little more quickly. And so what I might say is this item description. So like for each item, we have an item description. Okay, and the source code or the code for these item descriptions, as you might have guessed, comes from these two view files. So we have the items file, which is just going to describe this list here. So it's just going to describe all of these items here. So like this view, to choose a word, maybe a bit poorly, but it's describing like the way all of the content that you see here. How about that? And then if we click in, what we're actually looking at is this code, which is describing, it's giving us a description for a particular item. So for each item here, we have a different description, okay? So if I wanted to change the way the description looks, I would do that in here, okay? So that's kind of a breakdown of like where the code is coming from. But what we wanted to do is we kind of want to like set all of this aside for now. And we want to think about the styles. So like overall, how everything looks in our app. And this might be a little bit experimental, but I encourage you to kind of play with this if you can get to this point, because it can be really helpful to kind of learn this way, to kind of dive in. So back to our notes. For our app in particular, what I wanted to demonstrate is the fact that we don't use HTML like a normal web page would for our mobile app. There are some frameworks that will let you use HTML, which is that core web technology that looks like, again, I'm going to use the MDN as a crutch here. I'm going to go to technologies, click HTML, just so we can see some like really basic looking HTML. So what is HTML? This is a great page. It's going to give you like a breakdown of what it is, but we're not super concerned with that because we're not using it. This is like what HTML looks like essentially. And you'll see that this doesn't look that different, right? Like inside of this template here, we have stuff that looks a lot like HTML, but it is actually different. It's something specific to Nativescript. The good news is that it's actually simpler than HTML. The kind of downside, I guess you'd say, is we can't use just any old CSS that we find on the web. So for example, if I go back to my notes, we can't just use this CSS framework that I found here on the web because we're not using HTML. And this relies on HTML being used. Okay, so because of that, we can't use something like this. So we might use this if we had like a web page project. But for Nativescript, we need to keep in mind that we're going to rely on something in CSS called a class selector, or classes in general. So if we go back and we close these, well, let's leave this one open because I think this one is an easy one for us to change, for us to change the kind of look of things and to kind of focus on this. So I'm going to leave this in here. I'm going to leave this up. And in the meantime, I'm just going to open this app.common SCSS. And by the way, I don't care about, like platform specific styles. So I'm actually going to delete these in my app because I'm not interested. All I care about are the common styles, the styles that are used no matter what phone you have. That's all I need to worry about. And we're going to look, and you'll notice here that in fact, the CSS that's already here that was provided with the template, it's only using what are called class selectors. So how do you tell that something is a class selector? It uses this period. So it says dot FAB or dot FAS. This is the class, and this is the selector. So it's saying, okay, anything in the code that references this class, okay, is going to use these CSS rules. So these are the rules. The rules are very straightforward to read. This is the thing that you're making the rule for, and this is like the kind of the rule. Well, it's not the rule. This full thing is the rule. This is the value, and this is like the property. So property here, font family. So like what kind of font? And this is the value. So the font is Font Awesome 5 brands. We don't have to use this font, for example, but let me see if there's a class that's actually being used. So I can just kind of give you a demonstration of like what is going on with these rules, like whether these rules are actually being used in our application right now. So I actually don't see any classes being used in this piece of code here. And the way I can like confirm that is like I expect an attribute. An attribute is like one of these things in orange on an element, which is this. So this is an element. This whole thing is an element. And this is an element. Elements can be inside of other elements. An attribute is this part. So an attribute on an element, in this case, would be like orientation or item tap or for. These are attributes. Text for a label might be one that's a little more clear. So for instance, actually, this is a good example because this is just text. So any change we make to it is going to be pretty obvious. So I'm actually going to add a class here. And you can see my editor already doing some nice work. It's going to help me. It's going to make suggestions to me, like what it thinks I might want to do. And it was trying to help me figure out whether or not I wanted to add a class, and I do. So to add a class, what I'll do is I'll just say class, and then I'll give it a unique name. The name can be really anything that I want it to be, but I try to choose unique names because that way it's easy for me to remember. So I'll say action bar label, because that's what this is. It's an action bar label. So this is an element action bar. And this is the label. By the way, if you're confused, like how, I know we just set up this template and, I didn't write any of this code by hand. All I did was make this template using the command line. Okay. You're wondering like, how would I ever know like what all of these things are? Like, what is a list view? What is, what is an action bar? All of these things. Okay. That's where the handy Nativescript view documentation comes into play. So if we go back over to this tab, I opened this up earlier and I presented this information in previous sessions. All you do is you scroll down and you take a look at the elements section. Every single element in Nativescript is available right here. So there's not that many, as you can see. It's a pretty simple system. So it's relatively easy to get used to. It's not like HTML. HTML's got tons and tons of elements that you kind of have to like learn about, and that there's documentation for. So already we can see, if we go back to our code, this action bar, we can see action bar right here. When we click it, there's going to be documentation for how to use the action bar. So this is super useful. It'll even show you documentation specifically for like on Android, how to make it look a little bit different and things like this. Okay, so we know what an action bar is now, and we can also find out what a label is. So if I scroll down here and I can say label, and we can see here, okay, there's documentation describing what a label is. So it even shows us actually how to style the label in particular. You know, if you want to like style pieces of text in your label, excuse me, whoops, don't know why I did that. Formatted string. Oh, this is a broken link, unfortunately, but that's okay. So it wants you to like basically make really, you know, a specific piece of text inside of this label. You could use code like this, but I'm not going to do anything like that. I'm actually just going to use simple text as we are. I'm just going to add a class to it that we're then going to reference or set up in our CSS file. So I'm going to copy this. Oops, copy this class. And you can see again, whoa, it already made a change. Action bar label. I wonder what made that change. It really didn't like that I did that. I wonder what I did to make this happen. Did I? Whoa, I really broke everything. That also happens sometimes. You never know. Yeah, I don't know. It seems to think everything is fine over here. That's kind of disastrous. Unfortunately, I haven't committed this on Git, so it's hard for me to tell what changes I must have made to break this. But maybe what we can do is like just we can actually use our phone here and like restart the app. Oops. I think let me just keep clicking the home button. If I double click, no, I don't want to delete it. Oh, okay, there we go. So now I can like swipe it up and close the app. I just happen to know that you can do this because I have an iPhone. Let's try reopening it. Maybe, I don't know. No, it still does not. It really doesn't like what I did earlier. I don't know what I must have done to really ruin things, but that's okay because we're only actually interested in this particular item. So earlier, I'm going to go back to this item details. So item details describes like the way everything looks in this view. So when we click on an individual item, if we want to like modify the way that this looks in particular, we can work in this file. And so what I wanted to do basically is just add a style to affect the way that this label looks in particular. So I can just click here, type in and add a class, the action bar detail label. You don't have to make names that are this long. You can make shorter names. And it's refreshing the app because we made a change to it. And yeah, nothing is different because I don't actually have a piece of CSS code that's referencing this class yet. So nothing should really be that different. If we hop in here though, and we start to reference this class, so I'm going to copy it like that. Oh, I think I know what happened. I deleted these files. Yeah, it didn't like that I deleted these files. So that might be a word to the wise for you. The files I deleted earlier. So remember I deleted, actually, I can cheat. I have this other template app. We can actually just go steal the files. I deleted this file and it really did not like that I did that, I guess. It totally changed all the styles. I'm just going to copy it from the old template and paste it in here. But that's, so a word of warning. If you delete the platform specific style, I guess, it will totally, yeah, okay, so now everything looks like we expect again. That's good. Yeah, so just keep that in mind, I guess. Yeah, what this is doing is basically referencing these styles and pulling them in. And I know we're out of time. I know it's 7:30, but I'm just going to go ahead and write a little quick piece of CSS code to show you what actually happens if I write a rule for this particular piece of code here. So it says we have a label inside of the action bar. And it's okay if you don't fully understand like how all of this stuff is communicating. That's hopefully the benefit of starting with a template. And we'll hopefully get around to more JavaScript next time, which will inform us on like how this works. But essentially, we're getting the name of each individual item that we can click. And you can kind of see this. Hopefully it's intuitive. So you can see the item name here, item 2, item 3, item 4. When we click it in the action bar, which we've already seen from the documentation, right here, if I go here, back up to action bar, oops. So go to action bar, we see, oh, unfortunately, we don't see anything, unfortunately. But maybe if I click here, we can see what it's talking about. Yeah, it's talking about this right here. It doesn't have an example, I guess, because it doesn't want to show something either specific to, oh, well, okay. There's this documentation. If I had just read, it would say that there's complete documentation for the action bar. Wow, which is a lot of stuff. This isn't very helpful either. Yeah, I guess I kind of like this documentation. Okay, if you click into this. So hopefully that's clear. If you click into this, it kind of describes what we're talking about. But this action bar is just this at the top. And we can see here where it's getting the content for that bar. And so with this last couple of minutes, just what I wanted to show you is if I make some CSS that changes, for example, the font, or how about this, even the color. I just happen to know offhand that the way to change the font color is going to be to use the word color as the property that we want to change. And then I can actually just take advantage of keywords. And I can say like yellow or something like this. And CSS, in fact, knows exactly what to do. Yeah, when I specify this keyword, and you'll notice now all items in the action bar will have this yellow color. And that's because I made a CSS rule that refers to a specific class called action bar detail label. I refer to that class in my CSS with the dot. And in my view file, I can reference that class anywhere I want. I can even reference it below. It doesn't have to be anywhere in particular, right? In fact, we already have a class being referenced here. We have two classes, M10 and H3. I can actually just add this class to this list. It's just a space separated list. So 1 class, 2 class, 3 class. I can add this here. And you'll see, if I click in, now the description itself is yellow. So hopefully this was interesting. We didn't quite get to pulling in a full CSS framework. I did kind of want to do that, but that's okay because we ended up actually looking at writing a little bit of CSS ourselves to kind of modify our app. And we can undo all of this actually, and we can see that when I save, it'll just go back to normal. So everything goes back to normal. So that kind of wraps up everything. Just a heads up, Celeste, I might probably actually continue the series a little bit more because I think.
Okay, so,
yeah. So if anyone was like worried, like, oh no, like this is the end, we haven't even really gotten into like some more like JavaScript and stuff. Yeah, I'd like to. I
think it's great, and I think we can actually maybe post it in Facebook and social media as well. That we're gonna continue the series.
Great. Yeah. I think we can just continue until we get to a good stopping point. So I definitely have more stuff that I'd like to talk about and that I'd like to cover. So thanks everyone for joining, or those who are watching on Facebook. Thanks for joining there. And next time we continue, we'll hopefully get to further down on some of these notes because I wanted to talk about why you might use or how you might approach writing a bunch of CSS for your app to make changes like this. So to make things just look different. So that's what we'll hopefully talk about next time. We did get to this at least, to change some things. So I think that's good.
I think it was great, like really interesting.
Yeah. I hope so. Thanks everyone.
All right, thank you everyone. Have a good night.
Yep, see you next time.
See you next time.
Bye.